You can hate no one is above the Constitution, why the presidency cannot be suspended. Political tempers are rising. Emotions are boiling over. But here is a hard constitutional truth that many are refusing to confront. You can oppose President Hakainde Hichilema. You can criticize his policies. You can even campaign to remove him at the ballot box. But you cannot suspend the presidency itself. So why are some voices behaving as though presidential authority can simply be paused, ignored, or overridden? And what does the Constitution actually say? Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. It's been quite a week here, with so much happening across the continent that demands our attention. But today, we're diving into something that strikes at the very heart of democratic governance itself. Our lead story today: the constitutional crisis that cannot happen, why no one, not even a president, can be above the law. Picture this: a nation wakes up one morning to whispers, quiet at first, then growing louder, that the presidency itself might be suspended. That the highest office in the land, the symbol of democratic will, could simply be paused. Put on hold. Set aside like an inconvenient appointment that can be rescheduled. Imagine the shock. The disbelief. The constitutional chaos that would follow. But here's where it gets deeper, viewers. What if these weren't just rumors? What if powerful voices that should know better, were actually entertaining this notion? What if the very foundations of constitutional democracy were being tested, not by foreign enemies or natural disasters, but by the dangerous idea that the rules can be bent when someone becomes unpopular enough? Can a sitting president be suspended simply because citizens have lost faith? Can public opinion override constitutional provisions? Can hatred, however justified some might feel it to be, become grounds for constitutional violation? And if we allow this precedent, what stops it from happening to the next leader? Or the one after that? Where does it end? What happens when we decide that the Constitution is merely a suggestion, applicable only when convenient? What happens to the rule of law itself? Factual foundation. The revelation came to light through social media conversations, public discourse, and growing political tensions surrounding various African presidencies, particularly focusing on situations where leaders face declining popularity or accusations of governance failures. The context is crucial here. In recent years, across multiple African nations, we've seen a troubling pattern. Leaders who fall out of favor with portions of their populations suddenly face calls not for electoral defeat, not for impeachment through proper channels, but for immediate removal through extra-constitutional means. The language varies: suspension, stepping aside, interim arrangements, but the intent remains the same: circumventing established legal processes. The specific catalyst for this discussion emerged from heated debates about President Hakainde Hichilema of Zambia. Often referred to as HH by supporters and critics alike. As his administration faced criticism over economic challenges, unfulfilled campaign promises, and controversial policy decisions, a dangerous narrative began circulating that he should be suspended from office. This isn't about one country or one leader. Similar conversations have erupted in Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, and elsewhere. The pattern unfolds like this. Stage 1. A president makes unpopular decisions or faces economic headwinds. Stage 2. Public frustration mounts on social media and in streets. Stage 3. Opposition voices begin testing the waters with phrases like "he must step aside" or "suspend the presidency." Stage 4. Constitutional scholars and legal experts sound alarms that are often ignored in the heat of political passion. Stage 5. The dangerous precedent takes root in public consciousness as a viable option. The timeline matters because we're witnessing a gradual erosion of constitutional literacy, a growing disconnect between what people wish could happen and what the law actually permits. Direct evidence. Now, let me share with you what constitutional experts have been saying about this very issue. Professor Michilo Hansundule, a renowned constitutional law expert from Zambia, addressed this directly in a recent interview. When asked about calls for presidential suspension, he stated, The Constitution does not, provide for suspension of a sitting president based on popularity or public sentiment. It simply doesn't exist in our legal framework. You can dislike a president. That is your democratic right, but, your dislike does not create constitutional grounds for removal. We have specific provisions: impeachment for gross misconduct, incapacity determined through proper medical and legal channels, and of course, the ballot box. Those are your remedies. The interviewer pressed him, "But Professor, what if the majority of citizens want the president gone?" His response was unequivocal. Then they must wait for elections, or they must pursue impeachment through parliament if they have grounds. Democracy is not mob rule. It is rule of law. The Constitution protects unpopular presidents just as much as popular ones. Otherwise, we have no constitution at all, we have tyranny of the moment. Legal analyst Lumba Sianga added her perspective in a televised panel discussion. "Look, I understand the frustration people feel. I really do. But when we start saying, suspend the president, what we're actually saying is, ignore the Constitution. And once you do that, once you establish that principle, you've opened Pandora's box. The next president, and the one after that, they'll all be vulnerable to the same extra-constitutional removal whenever public opinion shifts." A caller to a popular radio program captured the public sentiment, "But he promised us things. He's not delivering. Why should we wait 5 years to remove someone who's failing us?" The host, journalist Patrick Matabini, responded, "I hear you. But the Constitution anticipated this exact scenario. That's why we have impeachment provisions. That's why we have elections. The framers knew that presidents would sometimes fail, would sometimes disappoint. They built in remedies. What they didn't build in deliberately was suspension based on unpopularity." Another voice worth hearing comes from opposition politician Trevor Mwind, who despite his fierce criticism of the current administration, told a rally, "Yes, I want this president out of office. Yes, I believe he has failed Zambians. But I will not call for his unconstitutional removal. Because if we normalize that today, someone will use it against us tomorrow. We fight within the constitutional framework, or we fight against the Constitution itself. There is no middle ground." Perhaps most tellingly, a constitutional lawyer who requested anonymity told me in an interview, "The problem is that people think suspension sounds less severe than coup or unconstitutional removal. But legally, they're the same thing. You cannot just pause a presidency. It's not a Netflix subscription. Either the person holds office according to constitutional provisions, or they are removed through constitutional provisions. There is no third option that respects the rule of law." Deeper analysis. So what are we really talking about here? Why does this matter beyond the immediate political drama? The implications run deep, viewers. Deeper than any single presidency or administration. First, let's address the legal architecture. Modern African constitutions were largely designed in the wake of independence or post-conflict transitions. They emerged from painful histories of military coups, dictatorships, and the abuse of power. The drafters of these constitutions lived through eras when leaders declared themselves president for life, when unpopular governments were simply overthrown by whoever had the most guns. The constitutional frameworks we have today, imperfect as they are, represent hard-won victories against arbitrary rule. They establish that power flows from law, not from force or fleeting popular sentiment. Civil society organizations have weighed in across the continent. The Southern African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes issued a statement emphasizing, constitutional democracy requires patience. It requires tolerance of leaders we may despise. It requires faith in process over immediate gratification. This is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Political analysts note a troubling pattern: the degradation of constitutional norms often begins not with dramatic violations, but with seemingly reasonable questions. What if we just suspend him temporarily? Sounds less alarming than let's overthrow the government. But constitutionally, they lead to the same place. The ambiguities here are important to acknowledge. Yes, there are emergency provisions in most constitutions, situations where normal operations may be suspended. But these almost always involve the president declaring a state of emergency, not the president being subjected to emergency removal. The power flows from the office, not against it, except through specified channels like impeachment. Different political parties have taken varying stances. Some opposition parties have been disciplined in their criticism, focusing on electoral strategies and policy alternatives. Others have flirted with more radical rhetoric, perhaps sensing that constitutional niceties don't win votes in angry times. The international community has also reacted. The African Union's Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, which most African nations have signed, explicitly prohibits unconstitutional changes of government. Suspension of a president outside legal frameworks would violate these commitments. Here's the uncomfortable truth, viewers: you can absolutely hate a president. You can despise their policies, criticize their character, oppose their every decision. That is your democratic right. Indeed, it is vital to democratic health. But your hatred does not create constitutional authority. And this is where we must be honest with ourselves. Are we building societies governed by law, or societies governed by feeling? Are we willing to protect constitutional processes even when they protect people we can't stand? Because if we're not, then we don't actually believe in constitutionalism, we believe in power, dressed up in constitutional language when convenient. The systemic concern is this. Once you establish that presidents can be removed through extra-constitutional means when they become sufficiently unpopular, you've destroyed the predictability and stability that allow democracy to function. Every administration becomes vulnerable not to legal accountability, but to the mob, to social media storms, to whoever can generate the most outrage. And history shows us where that leads. Not to better governance, but to chaos, to strongmen who promise to restore order, to the very authoritarianism that constitutions were designed to prevent. Viewers, thank you so much for watching today's edition. This is not a comfortable topic. It requires us to defend principles even when applying those principles protects people we may deeply dislike. But that is precisely when principles matter most, when they're difficult to uphold. I want to hear from you. Do you think there should be mechanisms for removing unpopular presidents outside existing constitutional provisions? Or do you believe that constitutional integrity must be maintained regardless of public sentiment? How do we balance accountability with rule of law? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have this conversation respectfully, thoughtfully, and with the seriousness it deserves. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories that matter, more discussions that challenge us, and more insights into the Africa we're building together. This is Nakash, reminding you that democracy is not easy. But it is worth fighting for, within the bounds of law and constitution.